recorded at Get a Grip Studios in Toronto, Canada. Get a Grip Management production and in association with the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Presented by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, the National Lighting Bureau, the Illuminating Engineering Society, and of course, the International Dark Sky Association. This is Starving for Darkness. I know you're hungry, folks. I know you're starving. Starving for Darkness with Jane Slade and Michael Colligan coming up real soon. But before we get into that, it's not always and every day that you come across something magical. That's right. I'm talking about Evluma, Greg Eric. Evluma, EVLUMA.com.
Talk about a company who's committed to the darkness movement that we're pushing here with this podcast. Area Max, it's utility-grade LED luminaire designed for residential street lighting, parking lots, security lighting, and area lighting applications. What's nice about this thing is that it has Type 5, Type 3, and dark sky-friendly lens options on it. Surge protection better than anyone, 20 kV, 10 kA, and lightweight housing, easy toolless access, great fixture, replace anywhere up to a 250 watt HID with this thing. Check it out.
Whoo, the magicians down at Evluma coming in hot again with another great dark sky ready product. Go to EVLUMA.com. That's right, Greg. Evluma.com. Check them out.
Hello, listeners and darkness lovers. My name is Jane Slade. I'm here with my co-host Michael Colligan for another episode of Starving for Darkness. Starlight is the birthright of all living things, and that is why we are so happy to have our guest here, Andy Kreyche. Andy has been involved in astronomy education and outreach for over 25 years. So I feel like you have so much information and a wealth of knowledge to share with us on the subject of astronomy and education on the topic. We start every episode with the same request of our guest, Andy, which is to please tell us about a dark sky experience that you had that left you feeling like a human on Earth, like you are small, like you are infinitesimal. So please share that with us.
Yeah, how long do you have here?
Enough time for you.
Yeah, good. I was born in the Midwest in Indiana. My family was living in Kansas City, Missouri. And when I was going into first grade, that summer before first grade, our family moved from Kansas City, Missouri to Tucson, Arizona, where IDA was born, coincidentally. And I just remember being out in the desert and looking at this star-filled sky and just being in awe of that. So that was kind of the inspiration for me going down this path. More often than not in astronomy, you plan for these great astronomical events. This is kind of a running joke among astronomers, and you get a cloudy night. And one thing that happened shortly after we moved in 1966, and one of the greatest recorded meteor storm of all time. So meteor showers happen on a regular schedule, but every 33 years, the Leonid meteor shower in November takes place on my wife's birthday, actually, November 17th. There's a lot more meteors. This is having to do with the stream of particles along orbit of a comet. So in 1966, there was a group of amateurs that went up to Kitt Peak, which was about 50 miles away from Tucson, and they recorded something like 150,000 meteors per hour that they saw during this 45-minute period. And, so it's like something like 40 a second. If you know the song Stars Fell on Alabama, that old jazz song standard, that's about the meteor storm of the Leonids. I think the one in 1833 maybe. So I missed that because I was asleep. I was in first grade. I missed that. So, but I'd get books out of the library and remember this kind of nondescript blue book of the planets that I would, have all the time. And I heard about this Comet West, that was coming along. I think that was 1970, so I would have been 11. And so I set my alarm to get up at 5 in the morning because it was near the sun. So you could either, when it's near the sun, you can either see it in the evening or the morning. So this was a morning apparition. And I set my alarm and slept right through it. So there's many more that I've missed, but fortunately, I'm 62 now, so I've had quite a few great encounters. I live here in Santa Cruz on the central coast of California, in Monterey Bay area. So we're basically straight west of Yosemite. So I've been to the Sierra a lot. So the eastern Sierra, I've seen Comet Hale-Bopp in the sky and got a wonderful picture and just kind of wonderful experience seeing that. That was in the mid-90s. There was a kind of go-to place down there in kind of Southern California, really, Red Rock Canyon. There's many Red Rock Canyons, but this is Red Rock Canyon State Park in Southern California. And yeah, there I've seen several things. I mean, we went there for the Leonid meteor storm 3 years later after I was in first grade. So this is 1999. And, you've heard the expression meteor shower. So meteors, when you go out and see them, you don't need a telescope. You can see them all over the sky. They're just random. And but if you trace them back, they go to a central point where it's called the radiant, where they appear to come from. And that's how you know they're associated with that storm. And I'd stayed up all night, seen quite a few, nothing like 150,000 an hour. But the sun was coming up in the east. It was starting, not sun wasn't coming up, but dawn was rising. So it was getting light over there, but it was only dark in the west. And the radiant was up in the west, but the only place you were going to see meteors was where they were coming straight down, and that was towards the west, and it looked like rain, seeing these meteors come down. So I saw that same place, just random luck. We had a astronomy trip planned for Red Rock Canyon State Park, and a few days before it happened, there was a big coronal mass ejection, this big solar storm that shoots out particles towards Earth, and very predictably, auroral activity is much higher once these particles hit Earth. And it takes a few days because they're traveling much slower than the speed of light, obviously, because they're actual particles. And I'd forgotten about it. I was working a day-to-day job, and it's like, just okay, get my work done, and we'll go out and do some astronomy. And we got there on a Friday night, and we're sitting around the campfire because we didn't do astronomy typically the first night, so we had a campfire. And then this guy said, "What's that red glow up towards the north?" And then it hit me. It's like, oh, right. So I don't really like the term bucket list, but I've always wanted to see the aurora and figured out I'd be freezing my butt off in Alaska or Manitoba somewhere, And here it was, Joshua trees and this, tremendous auroral display with people hooting and hollering around the campground. It was bizarre because it was so quiet. It deserved some, dramatic orchestral soundtrack. It was so beautiful. But here it was just silent. So,
But most people can't pass on the movement, the flittiness of the Northern Lights. That there's like a flittiness to it. When you watch it, it
right.
moves. And
Right.
if you haven't seen the Northern Lights, it's something to see because it kind of flows and moves as you watch it. And when I saw it, it was kind of moving and flowing. You could see it. Was it just a glow that you saw, or could you see like the?
Oh no, yeah, it started off as a glow, and then it gradually took over the entire sky. And I think that particular storm, auroras were viewed down as far south as northern Mexico. So it was a pretty dramatic display. Yeah, and just totally unexpected, just out of the blue, or out of
I
the
think
black.
you bring up a really interesting point, though, Andy, which is that these events, even if light pollution wasn't a factor, they're very lucky events to come across because you have to be in the right place and time, and there has to be no bad weather. And so, it all sort of has to come together. And we're making it so much less likely with light pollution, which is obviously the conversation of the show. But I think the other side of it is that when you do experience an astronomical event like this, that there isn't a luckiness that is so moving about it that you got to see the aurora borealis in Joshua Tree, because I
Right.
have seen the aurora maps and they are, surprisingly south, but they're not like they happen all the time there. So it's something that you will remember because it was so extraordinary to be able to see them at such a low latitude. So and then just all of the events of being a kid and being asleep and not quite getting it, and so I think that there is something that's very lucky about trying to capture one of these events, and to see it. And it's a reverence that we don't get to hold very often because we're kind of blinding our view in general. So it's a fascinating encapsulation. Do you have any more anecdotes you want to share on this topic?
Oh, absolutely. The first um, total eclipse I saw was an annular eclipse, and these are the ones that happen when the moon is further away in its orbit, so it's not large enough to cover up the sun. And so, yeah, there's luck involved with weather, but you can plan for these things, and that's what astronomers do, amateurs especially. Is it's like they'll you know mark it on their calendar years in advance. So I was up by Mount Lassen, and the it's kind of like the eye of God staring at you when there's this weird ring of fire. That's what they call it, ring of fire eclipse. And I just got this kind of feeling of almost terror in the pit of my stomach, because even though I know in my head, oh yeah, the sun's lining up, and the sun and the moon are lining up, and this is what's happening. I was thinking, if you were some poor shepherd 900 years ago and you looked up and saw that, you would lose it. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is doesn't it just didn't look right. It didn't feel right. It was just, something's wrong here. And, you have all these stories throughout history of, the dragon eating the sun, and, a portend of bad things to come. And I really kind of got that on some sort of gut level. And so I saw that one before I saw my first total solar eclipse, which was in 2017, the Great American Eclipse that went from Oregon, down to South Carolina, I think it was, all across the United States. And and that was beautiful. But yeah, somehow I didn't get that same feeling somehow. But yeah, it was an extraordinary event. We had cows next to us, and they started going in their barn, uh, and
Wow.
and the weather was
Wow.
strange. You know, you could feel a cool breeze, 45 minutes before it even happened. So yeah, so
Hmm.
um, powerful stuff. And I guess the last example I'll give you is the most recent one. So I'm trying to assist Pinnacles National Park, which is fairly nearby here, become certified as a dark sky park. So I had um, a meeting to go to there, so I arranged it for the evening of this lunar eclipse, or the day after. So I camped there, and a lunar eclipse, you can see it from the city, so it's not something you have to go to a dark sky site for. But and that's kind of the mantra you hear. So that's kind of the mantra in my head. And I go and we get up at 3:30 in the morning. We're sitting in our beach chairs and we're watching this thing happen. And then very slowly and dramatically, as the moon gets dark, duh, all the stars come out. And
Oh.
you're not going to see that. And the last time I saw it was on the beach in Santa Cruz. And, I didn't get that effect. And there's these subtle little things that even someone like me, will forget about. and then it's kind of gobsmacks you when you see it and experience it.
So right there, you got to see the night sky shift. And actually, this is a dream of mine to make the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere a dark sky hour, because it's already the darkest night. And so
Right.
to be able to advocate, and so listeners now, if you want to help us start this, let's make the winter solstice a dark sky day where we all turn the lights out from 8 to 10 and see if we can see the difference. But you were able to see that by a factor of the moon and celestial bodies getting in the way right then and there to see that crisp difference in light. Actually, I have a quote here from Yasunari Kawabata. And he said, the true joy of a moonlit night is something we no longer understand. Only the men of old, when there were no lights, could understand the true joy of a moonlit night. And I think that's fascinating that, we kind of lose that arc of the full moon in our cycle of understanding of the world, and how different a full moon would have felt if you truly didn't have light supporting you all the time.
Right.
And so I just think our conception of light at night is just vastly different than it used to be. Mike, you wanted to jump in with a point.
Can I just get that information? I
Yeah,
just want to write
Yeah,
that guy's
yeah.
name down
go
again.
on.
Oh,
Well,
oh,
Well,
sure. It's yeah,
I would.
Yasunari Kawabata. I'll send it to you.
okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about the meteor showers that you're talking about, and I was just going to say that's not a simile. Like they actually are showers. Like I was looking at the pictures that you can see, and you can see these. There's illustrations and there's also some photos of when these things happen. And there's a lot of meteors falling. It's actually unbelievable to see something like that. So a meteor shower is there. You're actually talking that's what's happening, and not. It's like, well, there's a lot of meteors. There's 150,000 an hour is a heck of a lot of meteors actually.
Yeah,
That's a lot of
yeah,
meteors.
that's remarkable.
But the point that I was going to make about these sort of spiritual um, events that occur at night in relation to the sky and the stars and the moon, it's not when you delve into this, it's very easy to understand why our ancestors thought God was up there. And that these events, like these events that happen to them, it would naturally happen to every human over the course of a regular life. You would see meteor showers and lunar eclipses and beautiful starry nights and the aurora borealis, and you'd have this constant energy and message coming at you from the sky. You can totally understand why they would come to the conclusion that that's where the creator is. Of course he's there. He's
Yeah,
sending us
right,
messages all the time.
right.
It's before, if you're not in, you haven't learned science, you're living in a tribal, hunter gatherer environment. Even the rudimentary hunters, farmers in the beginning with no artificial light. Of course, that's exactly what they
It's
would believe.
astounding. It's mysterious.
Yes.
It's powerful. Yeah, why not? Yeah, and it's interesting
So,
that you brought up this Japanese quote because in the presentations I give, I'm kind of a fan of history, and I like going back in time and telling people, okay, well, here's a couple people that saw this as an issue, 100, 200 years ago, and one of them is a Japanese novelist, or was a Japanese novelist, Junichiro Tanasaki, and he wrote this little short essay. You can read it in one sitting, called "In Praise of Shadows." So
oh yeah,
part of his
I have that on
history.
my desk.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's great because he was born around the turn of the 20th century, and I guess early in his life he kind of was interested in Western culture and kind of intrigued by it. And then later on, he kind of did a 180, and he just said, "No, we're losing all our Japanese culture to Western culture. Everything's getting Westernized." And this book is just he just has these wonderful descriptions of light bulbs, and he describes them as balls of fire. They have a bunch of them where one would do the trick. They have many of them, and describes the subtleties of some aspects of Japanese culture, like gold threads in kabuki costumes that were meant to be seen in low light. And, you got the shoji screens in the homes, and the middle of the home was meant not to have a lot of light. And, seeing these things in those situations is much different. And I think he goes on about, you'll go to a museum and see one of these costumes with the gold threads, and they'll have, spotlights blazing on it, and it looks gaudy. But yeah, seeing it and realizing that, we go on about, scotopic vision, what you're allowed to see in those circumstances is something people don't experience anymore.
It's so true. And so, part of the mission of this show is to raise awareness and educate. And I know that you do so much of that education. And and as lighting educators, we really face the idea that more light is sexier and brighter and more attractive. And we actually just recently had a psychologist on the show saying that our visual system is actually is designed to go for the brightest thing. So here we are kind of trying to raise awareness to fight that notion of going for the
Right.
brightest thing. And so, I want to get into your work as an educator. I know that you fell in love with the dark sky as a child. How did you get into education in the astronomical field?
Yeah, so I had just a kind of day-to-day job in a food manufacturer. I had kids. I had to, my background's actually in theater. That's what I studied in college. But I had to get a job. I had kids, and had to have insurance and make a living and all that sort of stuff. But I still, you know, really had this interest in this. And when my kids were school age, third grade, fifth grade, probably. They're always asking for parents to volunteer in classrooms. So it's like, oh yeah, well, I should do something. Explain the seasons or explain, the planets. And so, came up with on my own like a scale model of the solar system, and we set it up in the playground area. Let's walk to Venus, let's walk to Earth, and so on. And, not long after that, I discovered there's this organization, the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, which is based just up the road from us, San Francisco, 75 miles, 120 kilometers north. And they are the astronomy education organization in the world. And their focus is really on, they do a lot of academic stuff, but on hands-on stuff and educating informal educators, people that work at museums, national parks, that sort of thing. And their signature program at that time was Project Astro, where they try to get people, astronomers, whether you're amateur or professional, volunteering in schools, just like I was doing. So I took that training. It's like, wow, this is exactly what I need. And yeah, the focus is having kids behave like scientists. So not
Hmm.
me going in there and yabbing for 45 minutes and, downloading all my knowledge to them. No, have them act like scientists, do little experiments, hands-on activities so they can really understand what's going on. So that grew, and I ended up taking some astronomy courses because I never had time for astronomy courses when I was doing theater, because that was just like a more than full-time thing when I was doing it. And that eventually led to part-time work in the planetarium, and then I kind of phased into doing that more full-time. And then kind of started a portable planetarium business. So they have portable planetariums that you can blow up with air, and have a classroom. You can take it to the school instead of having them have to do a field trip. So I started a company doing that. And then the pandemic hit. So, being in a small enclosed space, sharing air, not the best idea. So, actually, over the last year plus, I've been actually able to do a lot more advocacy work and kind of get into this while my astronomy education stuff has been on hold. So, there's been some overlap, obviously, but yeah, and that's kind
So
of the origin story.
it sounds like you have a really hands-on approach to teaching astronomy, which is great, and I think that's so important with kids. And I read mention that you have certain techniques for communicating about the dark sky. And do you want to share any of those?
Oh, about the dark sky itself. Yeah, I mean, you know, like an old saw is, oh, you have to warn kids about not staring at the sun. And it's like, no, you don't. Kids are smart. Kids don't stare at the sun. Nobody does, right? You know, so I try to play up their internal knowledge. It's like so instead of coming out and say, don't do this. I'm the adult. I'm the authority here. I say, hey, how many of you ever stare at the sun? And it's like, yeah, of course you don't. You're smart. You're smart people. You're young, but you're still, you know, you've got some sense to you. So that and yeah, I'll say surprisingly, but maybe it shouldn't be surprising to me based on these experiences. Um, Kids really glom onto this idea of
Mm.
dark skies when you tell them, and I think it's kind of ironic. One of the worst offenders as far as light pollution and the hardest to do something about is school districts. School districts are their own little fiefdom, so they're not under the city. They do things their own way, and of course, drive by any school, they look more like prisons these days, and they're all lit up at night. You know, no motion detectors. They're just 24/7 glare bombs, and that's just what it's come to in our modern society. Oh, we can't have people on the school grounds at night, so we got to have lights up all night. So yeah, we've one of our kind of minor um, projects here is we have a middle school that installed some school lighting or some field lighting, sports lighting, and we had conversations about them, and they gave us a courtesy meeting, and after that kind of ignored us and not very receptive. And one corner of the field is within 30 feet of a state park riparian area with migrating birds and that sort of thing.
Mm.
And it's a
Mhm.
newer installation, so it's one that could be dark sky certified as community friendly if it were not for the fact that it was so close to this area. That ruled it out right there. But we'd have conversations with them, and what I think happened is the salesperson sold them on a fancier system that gives them what is it, level 3 lighting, where it's just recreational. It's just guys getting together to play soccer, and they want to rent out the field, and they want to do it at night as well as during the daytime. So yeah, I mean, sales guy says, "Oh yeah, you need level 3," even though there's no spectators ever going to be there because it's just squeezed into this little corner of the field. So we're trying to explain this to them, but as it is with a lot of these things, you got to be way ahead of the curve. You got to know before, as soon as this project is dreamed up, that's when you got to start talking to people. But that's not the way the real world works. We find out about these things and they're partway through. And so, they've heard the pitch from the sales guy, they've committed the money to it. And so they don't want to change.
It's hard for people to admit they made a mistake. Very, very big problem in
Well, and
with
it's hard to point out people's mistakes
yeah, no,
too.
they just
It's hard
don't
to
want to hear
receive.
it.
Exactly. Yeah.
They have no desire to be told that they made a mistake, and and it's getting worse. That's actually been exacerbated by people, sort of hustling themselves into places on the internet that are confirmation bias friendly. Lighting has a huge problem with that, and we're just really now, after 10 years, starting to sort it out, where it's like, we have to admit as an industry that it wasn't all glory and environmentally friendliness over the last 10 years. The LED boom has put us in Jevons paradox, where because it's so cheap energy-wise and the fixtures are so cheap and made in China, and they come over here and it's $150 for 400 watts worth of LED, we can use as much of it as we want. And we can light up your field like the Scotiabank place or like where the Denver Broncos play. Don't you want that? Yeah, that's what we want. And
you can feel like NFL player. Or
yeah, what about the lighting controls? Lighting controls are so fussy. You got to download the app and we'll just leave them on all night. And it's so cheap. The energy's so cheap. This happens so much in the lighting industry, and it's gross. Quite frankly, I'm disgusted by it, and I'm part of it. I'm disgusted with myself as well. It's so difficult to. If you go in there trying to pitch a dark sky job, you're going to lose for sure to the guy that's saying, no, 5,000 K. Why would you want to have lower Kelvin temperature? Why would you not want uniformity? Why would you want cutoffs? Why would you not want more light? It's a very difficult problem to solve because the momentum is all in the other direction. But this show is about fixing that problem, and we intend to, Andy.
We've made a little bit of headroads with the city.
Santa Cruz?
In Santa Cruz, yeah. So, one of the things our Dark Sky chapter wanted to do is, okay, let's figure out what's the worst lighting we have here, and let's start there. And there's a river flowing through town, the San Lorenzo River. We have a Mediterranean climate, so it's not like a glacier fed or anything like that. There's not much going on there in the summertime. Not much water. There's a lot going on there, but this is a river that used to have a lot of steelhead and coho salmon in it, and no more. They're on the endangered species list, and so we have these bright, very close together acorns that they replace with LEDs. And we've done measurements. There's more light coming out as glare into the eyes than it's lighting up the roadway. What's a street light for? It's supposedly for lighting up the street. And of course, it's light coming out on all sides, this, textured surface. So it's diffusing all over the place. And of course, it lights up the river. And, lots of studies have shown us that, moths to the flame. I live in a place where we have squid fishermen that go out with these bright lights. You see them out on the bay or on the ocean to attract squid. And, all these studies say, juvenile salmonids are attracted to light at night, and that makes them prone to predation. Duh, right? It's so obvious. And, we talked to the mayor and city council, and that got us in to talk to director of public works. And so, what's your plan for lighting, director of public works? They don't really have one. They probably have, their own suppliers and choose something out of a catalog. Oh, this looks good for that. And it's like, and they like the old timey look of these acorns that inspires nostalgia for some.
Yeah, but you could do your acorns right. You can do acorns. Yeah. You can do it right. I mean, even the sponsor of this show, Evluma, they have an acorn dark sky friendly retrofit kit that it's fully dimmable. It has photo control. I don't mean to. I'm not here to advertise. Yep. Well, I am. I advertised for Evluma at the beginning, but you can do acorns really well with cutoffs and stuff like that, and you can preserve the look, and you can preserve. It's not an either or, and right. I don't like that. Sometimes it is. Yeah. But, the issue, how do there's so many different angles to take with the dark sky issue. Wildlife, human health, the way things look, beauty. These glare bombs, they think they're preserving something. Glare bombs are ugly and offensive. I don't know how we get this across to people. It's like right. You're driving, you see these acorns with 5,000 K light. First of all, an acorn was supposed to mimic a gas light. That's what it's supposed to mimic. In the lighting world, an acorn fixture, how come?
Have you seen the Mary Poppins sequel?
No.
No.
Yeah. The Lin-Manuel Miranda character is a lamplighter. And,
Hmm.
it takes place in the 30s. And like, wow, did they still have gas lamps in London in the 30s? And so I looked it up, and turns out they did. And I read about the kind of history. They were spaced way, way far apart. And of course, they were meant for wayfinding. You have this, tiny little flame in there. It's just so you don't get lost in the London fog, right?
Hmm.
So we're putting in these, bright fixtures in something that was meant for some, total other purpose.
Hmm.
Right, the old one-for-one replacement when you're taking a previous light source and then putting an
Right.
LED, it leads to a ton of overlighting. And I'm just curious, Andy, so you've sort of I read that you've kind of like had these walking tours with the mayor and or you've had these night walks to try and show how the lighting is really not working and that it's
Yeah.
creating harm. And how successful has that been for you?
Well, yeah. So getting to these bridge lights, they about 6 years ago, they put some um, lights up along the levee walk on either side of the banks on south of one certain point, and now they're wanting to put some on the north side. So we got together with the mayor and the police chief and this bike group because officially this is closed. And here comes another thorny issue. We live in this beautiful area with beautiful climate. We attract a lot of homeless people, and these lights are up to see what's going on there and to discourage you know bad behavior there. And there's a lot. Yeah, they went up to begin with because there was a murder on the levee between two homeless people. So and we can go on about safety, but
Oh, and
yeah,
we should. I want to get into that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we invited the mayor and the police chief and these other people and these other environmental organizations that we're trying to team with, and said, okay, we haven't put these up yet. Let's compare the experience of walking on this unlit path to the one that's already lit. Because what we were hearing is they're putting the same thing in because that's what works, right? And yet those existing lights shine down the bank, cause shadows all the way down to the river, riparian area again. Yeah, I mean, yeah, just the arrogance of human beings is just tremendous. There's a movement now. I don't know if you've seen this in the news about the rights of rivers to make rivers actually have rights like as if they were a human being. And
That's
and
beautiful.
I really love that idea because yeah, we're just arrogant with everything, including light. But anyway, we took these folks down there and explained, scotopic, photopic vision, and here's what are you experiencing? Ask them questions, just like I do with the kids, right? What are you experiencing? What's this like for you? And we passed by those bridges with the awful glare, and they could see the light shining directly in the river. Um, but we're dealing with bureaucracy here. So we had a meeting with Public Works, and I think after that meeting with the mayor and the police chief on the river, they put in another good word for us, and I gave a little impassioned speech and gave a little presentation at a committee meeting, Public Works Commission meeting, and they made some provisions to, oh yeah, we'll make them 4K instead of 5K
They
and
threw
that
you a
sort of thing.
bone.
They did, yeah. But the day after that meeting, we had um, through one of our contacts who's really connected with environmental organizations. She had sent an email to this guy for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which oversees the endangered species. And he had seen one of the pictures I'd taken of the bridge lights. And so I was not surprised that we just got thrown a bone, and other people said, "Oh, wow, that's amazing what you got." And okay, it's great comparatively speaking, historically speaking, but it's not what we want, but it's kind of what I expected. But the very next day, this guy from NOAA sent an email to the assistant director of public works saying, hey, it's been brought to my attention. You have these bridge lights shining directly in the river. You got to do something about it. And by the very next week, they put up some sort of shielding, internal shielding, inside some of those acorns, just a few of those. And as far as I know, they haven't done anything else. But it's kind of raised our level of, maybe we should listen to these guys in that respect. So
I
we're
find
having a few more conversations and email exchanges with Public Works now. So, and I will say, it exists in the Santa Cruz 2030 general plan. So in the early 2000s, they came up with a general plan, and I really want to find out who did this, but they included language about reducing light pollution and having a model lighting ordinance. And it was passed and adopted in 2012. So supposedly, everybody in our city should be working towards these goals set forth in the general plan. Of course, when the rubber hits the road, they just got a job to do. They got to do their stuff. And when they put in projects, they say, oh, yeah, this follows, is in line with the general plan. Well, I take that language and say, here's what the general plan says. The general plan says we should be looking into what IES and IDA say. Do you have any knowledge of what's coming down the pike with, IES 43? And they have no clue.
this is one of Mike's biggest bones. So I'm going to give this over to you, Mike. But the fact that laws get passed and then don't get enforced is really bothersome. And I find it funny because it sounds, in your anecdotal describing that there's just this like resignation of, oh, there's no more salmon and there's no more of that other species you mentioned.
Coho,
And it's just
coho salmon, or what is
uh,
it? Steelhead.
Steelhead.
Yeah, steelhead. Yeah.
steelhead. Oh, no big deal. You mean that's just what you get, And it's like actually there's a really famous case study right in Redding, California, where they did the lighting for the Sundial Bridge, and it led to a near extinction of the salmon in that river until they redid the lighting. And they figured out that it was the lighting itself that made the salmon a beacon for the predators to find them. So there's studies very close by showing exactly this phenomenon, and that we shouldn't be so resigned at the reduction of wildlife species in our rivers. And I completely agree that it's a living thing that has rights. It's not a single living thing, it's a body of living things, but it absolutely has rights. And that's why I started the show saying that starlight is a birthright for all living things. We were evolved and tuned to this starlight that we've ripped out of the lives of all living things. So it's a pinnacle, a pillar of life that we have removed. And who's to say what that's going to be for living things in the future when we don't have that source of information, not even just awe, but just vital information. So I think it's
Yeah,
absolutely true that
we were
yeah.
talking about the moon earlier too, and a lot of what you hear is like, oh well, this just puts out as much as light as the full moon, but that full moon isn't every day. It's on a cycle where you only have that peak of the full moon once a month. It's like,
Right.
and you're dealing with species that have eyesight 100 times more acute than humans. It's like um, selfishness, self-centeredness, egotism. As a culture, we just don't think beyond ourselves enough.
I don't know about anthropomorphizing rivers. I mean, I'm much. I think while I'm spiritual, when I look at execution, I have a pragmatic spirit. I don't know if giving I'd like to see humans get their rights back first before we gave them to rivers. But I do agree that there's a major problem with human arrogance, with this sense that, I had a guy on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. I do another show, and great guy, nice person, okay? But wait for this. You're going to hear it in a second. Jane, he said that, when we're out in sunlight, we're receiving between 5,000 and 10,000 lux at any given time. And so this is really good for our circadian rhythm. And so what we need to do is increase the inside light to 1,000 lux. Okay, Jane? Okay, so that's
I'm with you.
double a paint booth. Okay? And, like, you ever been in a paint booth? I've been in many paint booths. You go in there, it's actually literally pressure. I mean, this is, for paint. And so we humans, especially with light, we come up with the ideas and we think that wasted light, we think that light spilling everywhere else has no consequences whatsoever. And that nothing could possibly go wrong with sitting in an office getting hit with 1,000 lux of electric light. What could possibly go wrong with that? And you just think to yourself, like, many things could go wrong. And we're so arrogant. When we think we have a solution to one problem, we create another problem. But more important is that when we actually figure something out, we have people that write these things down and they pass laws, okay, or they make regulations, or they put the ordinances out there, and nobody enforces it. And it's has actually the opposite effect. It makes any other law that you make down the road meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. And it's the same with these I hate to bring up a controversial topic, but it's the same thing with happening in the United States with all these pledges about racism and inclusivity and equity that all these corporations made back last spring, okay? And they do absolutely nothing about it. It's a publicity stunt. Guess what? Make this statement, because then everyone's going to stop worrying about the fact that your cotton comes from China, that Xinjiang region or whatever. And if you just quickly make this statement, everybody's going to forget about all the other stuff you do, and then just let it ride for a while, and then everything will just go away. Sure. This is how people plan for this kind of stuff. They literally plan for it. Even with the when people make these regulations or model lighting ordinances, people look at that stuff and they go, nobody knows what the hell that thing says.
Well, I'm working with Pinnacles National Park, and one of the nearer cities is Hollister, California, and they actually have a lighting ordinance, and it took me a while to find it. And then when I find it, we might as well be talking about gas lights, because they're have sodium vapor lights and
sure.
and stuff. They have these pictures in their model lighting ordinance, and it's so
specific. You're pulling it out, you're blowing the dust off it.
Yeah, exactly.
The dust comes off it. Okay, here it is. No one's ever read it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the gal I'm working with, who works at the national park, lives in Hollister, and she just laughs every time I mention that Hollister has a lighting ordinance, because it's like, yeah.
We mean to change that. We actually have a plan. Yeah. I can't say it on because it's such a wonderful, beautiful plan. So we're going to be working on it on a committee. So we actually have a plan for that. But yeah, I mean, it's very frustrating for a person like you and in my position where I know who has lighting ordinances now in my area. They have no idea. The inspectors have no idea what you're talking about, and they have no interest in enforcing it whatsoever. None at all. What? If you can even talk to somebody. That's the other side of it.
We've had one success here going through code compliance. There was a warehouse facility on the far west side of town, and it was vacant for a year, and again, homeless people hanging out around there. And they moved in and started manufacturing these fancy skateboards and put up these just glare bombs all around the perimeter.
Prison yard.
And so we wrote them a few nice letters. They ignored it. So, it took, it wasn't me. It was, another member of our chapter going to code compliance and saying, hey, did they have a permit to put these lights up? No. Okay. So then you go through the process, and then they heard from code compliance, and they actually had to take them down because they were, obvious light trespass. So
fantastic.
Yeah. But one success story. It's it's good to get lifted up by these successes, but it just seems like a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, so we're as Starving for Darkness. We're embedded in the lighting industry. Jane and I. She's a lighting designer. I know sometimes you don't like me calling you that, but she's an advocate for darkness. But with a secondary, sometimes she does lighting design every now and then. I'm a lighting distributor, and I also own a lighting contracting company. So we are working in the background with the industry to kind of make this happen. But I think over lighting public spaces and areas makes the homelessness problem worse, not better. I would argue that, and whatever your take is on the homeless, that's a whole other can of worms you can open up.
Let's solve that today.
Well, what I would say is that certainly the homeless people would sleep better. That's the first thing. If you weren't shining prison light level lighting on them all the time.
Well, it's funny because some of them choose to camp out right under those lights
Sure.
I was describing on the bridge because
Absolutely.
they feel safer.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, what you're doing, and I have a theory. It's unproven. It's just a theory, okay? But if you look at videotape of many of the, did we lose him?
I think we lost him.
You there?
There you are.
I'm here.
Okay, so if you look at videotape of some of the protests that turned into riots later on at night, you look at them and you're like, is it daytime or nighttime where this is going on? Because the street lighting is absolutely so bright, like you can't you think like it must be. Is it day? How come it's so bright? How come you can see so clearly? That's a new phenomenon. That's a phenomenon of using LED lights replacing HPS. Okay, with max uniformity. So the level of difference between light levels between lights is actually quite low. So if it's 40-foot candles here, it's 37, 36, 34, and then it's 40 again or whatever. It doesn't dip a lot. And so the police think it's safer because they can see everyone, but they don't realize that, hey, guess what? Other people can see you too. And so I believe that I would love to see a study where cities, when they wanted people to go home, were able to warm their street lighting and dim it very slowly. And there's a lot of information from the lighting industry, PNNL especially, about cueing, about using cueing through lighting to tell people to do something. And they know that when you're in a hospital and you dim the lights and warm them, you don't have to tell people to go home at the end of visiting time. They do it on their own. And I think by having these bright lights, we're telling people, hey, man, it's party time. Stay here. These lights are on. The lights are on. Stay. I think that is a real phenomenon that we've created with the LED lighting projects we've done. And I don't know how to turn it back. I don't know if we can in the short term, but I think we can in the long term. We need a study for that. We need someone to study the impact of high Kelvin temperature, white, uniform street light at night, and does it make things less safe? Is it less safe? Not is it not safe or whatever, or does it actually increase criminal behavior? Does it cause people to become more violent at night? I think there's something to that, and I don't know the answer, but I suspect that the answer will be it does. And we need to cut them off, dim them down, and warm them up.
Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time at my local lighting store, trying to find appropriate fixtures to use at the national park. And
so Andy, actually, I want to jump in for while you're talking about that. Mm-hmm. You're talking about Pinnacle National Park. And so you are actually, Pinnacles. And so you're actually working to make that a dark sky place, correct?
Dark sky park, right.
Dark sky park. Ideation. So I want to illuminate that for our listeners, I guess, pun intended, just about the process that you're undertaking, because I think they're, for all of how cynical we can get in the arrogance of humans, and it is truly annoying, I think we can all agree. On the flip side, you're actually working on a project through certifying this to be a dark sky place. So what's that process like? What are you doing to darken the environment? I really want to dig into this because that is part of the solution.
Yeah, and I will, I think what Michael's talking about is even more important, because I give these presentations and I show a picture sometimes, my last slide, of Martha. Martha was the last passenger pigeon. It was in the Cincinnati Zoo for the last, 10, 15 years of her life, and, dropped dead in 1914, so um, I don't want dark skies to be, oh, let's go to a national park so we can see a dark sky. It's the same idea. Let's go see the passenger pigeon at the zoo. You know,
Right.
and to be fair, dark sky park certification has a lot to do with education. So I think that might be even more important than getting the lighting right in the dark. Well, getting the lighting right at the dark sky park will give people an example of what they can do at home. And what I'm finding out is, I'm dealing with the bureaucracy here. There's a movement to do this in all the national parks, which is great. So, I don't know how many hundreds of dark sky parks are certified yet, but most of them are kind of in the Rocky Mountain area where it's already dark. So good, preserve that, but really give people the tools so they can go back and do it in their community. So that's kind of my most important takeaway. As far as the process, I can tell you about. It's very frustrating to find uh, low lumen, dark sky friendly fixtures. There's not a lot out there that I
You're
can
telling me
tell
I'm
that.
a lighting distributor.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have
like
dozens of vendors. Okay, Evluma has done a good job in promoting, and everybody's sort of expanding this section. But you know what? This has to happen at the industry level across the board. And that's what we're working on with Starving for Darkness and with the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. We're starting this movement, and we all need to get behind it. And I don't know how to say this, but it makes me angry, you know, but we can't get cynical because cynicism is like arrogance's older brother. Like you get to cynicism through arrogance because you get smashed from your arrogance so much. Eventually, you become cynical. That's what happens to arrogant people is they become cynical when they get older. And so we can't be cynical. We have to work. But what you're saying about the park, I think your frustration is correct in that, you're working so hard to create Pinnacles National Park, and the meanwhile, there's light glare bombs going up everywhere in every city and town across the world at a clip that is not possible to like. The boats of loads of light fixtures are coming from China, and they're on the water. The orders are in to make the next batch, and it's like, well, we work so hard to get 400 fixtures installed at Pinnacles that are dark sky friendly, and 400,000 arrive from China that aren't, or made in America
right.
that aren't. And the incremental improvement is not going to help, and that's the frustration. There has to be an industry-wide acceptance and movement. All the big companies have to join the movement. I'm talking about Hubble, Cooper, Signify, GE, Cree. Like, you guys got to get off your pants. You got to stop looking behind you and saying, well, then that means we screwed up everything. Yeah, you did. Actually, we all did. But it's time to just acknowledge it, and let's kick off the biggest lighting boom in the history of lighting booms because everything's in play now. All the fixtures out there are going to have to be changed if we all get behind this. It's exciting for lighting
Yep.
people. It's not a bad thing. It's not a guilt trip. It's time to get
Yeah, no,
excited.
I think that's great because, just to go with the logic, it's like, okay, we just have a whole bunch of dark sky parks and that's the only place you can see a dark sky. That's not a solution,
Jane Slade
right?
won't like
So,
that one. Nope.
Well,
well,
I mean,
I
I think we can see
I
the
don't think
stars. It's Cape.
sky.
What were you saying,
Go ahead.
Andy?
Oh,
Well,
I'd
I
kind of like to
think
turn the
it
table.
is.
You'd be curious about your backgrounds and how you guys got into what you're doing. Because I've listened to your
Oh,
podcast before and I've never discussed. And, it's kind of something I'd like to encourage, young people. I'm doing astronomy education and, a lot of people think, oh, yeah, learn STEM and have people be astronomers. But, yeah, we need lighting designers. We need people to sell good lighting fixtures too. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of curious about that.
Well, it all started for me with an empathic hunch. We spend all this time thinking and talking about human-centered lighting, human-centric lighting, and I just was looking around being like, what about wildlife? And it was a pitch to Light Fair to speak at the conference in 2018. And the development of that talk changed the trajectory of my life and the trajectory of my career. And I want to say that, with the dark sky places, my great hope is not just that people will only go to these dark sky places to see the night sky, but that if light is addictive, then darkness is addictive. That if you've seen, a one RGB color changing light installation, you've seen them all, and that it pales in comparison to the beauty of a fire underneath the night sky every single time. And so I hope that by, informing listeners here that you can apply to have a dark sky park in your region if you advocate, if you do the education to bring the light levels down. It's very hard on the East Coast because we're already so high, but this is all within our hands to do. And so my great hope with dark sky parks is that we feed the addiction of darkness and show the beauty there. Mike, do you want to? I mean, I'm not sure where your dark sky story starts. I know where our story started, but where did your dark sky story start?
Well, I mean, I'm Canadian, and so Canada's, other than the 100 miles, Canada's kind of like Chile on Argentina, but Chile's the Pacific Ocean. Canada has like most of its land up there, but nobody lives there. So most of that land up there is dark sky. There's not even roads in most of it. So I've had my brother was a float plane pilot, so I've had many occasions being up north around fires and incredible stars, northern lights, so many times in my life. And then I met you, and we're at an IES convention. He's like, "Yeah, most people don't have access.
2019.
Yeah, 20. Most people don't have access to that." And then I thought, gosh, who could fix that? And I started looking into the IDA, and I find, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, I found that the IDA's relationship to the lighting industry has been less than cooperative. Not with both of them. They've kind of been standoffish with each other over the years. And I felt like, it was time for the lighting industry, for the grassroots, the distributors, to start saying, make different products, and to train distributors to talk to consumers and contractors about this kind of thing. And I was thinking about it, and then, I remember Jane, and then I said, let's start a podcast, and we'll try it out 6, and then we just went from there, and now it's turned into a whole movement. There's all manner of things going on in the background with the association I run, and the board of NAILED is very aggressive in this space. They are excited and hungry. They're doing a lot of things to move this forward. The only way this is going to happen on a mass scale is if the lighting industry changes the paradigm that we're not just selling lighting, we also provide darkness. That is fundamental to the paradigm of the lighting industry. It's not going to be the lighting industry anymore. It's going to be the lighting and darkness industry. Those two things have to come together. And so anybody that sells lighting has to also be able to sell the preservation of natural darkness. And not for astronomers. I think astronomers are part of the problem. This idea that the astronomers want dark skies. Who cares about them? Actually, it's for our health. It's for the wildlife. It's to preserve our relationship, our spirituality. There's all manner of different reasons for this. And Jane and I are hell-bent on making the case for it.
Yes, and
whenever
that's
I
one of my main goals is actually bringing this to the person that is not in the lighting industry, that is not an astronomer, that doesn't know about dark sky parks. In fact, my whole Instagram account is really bringing the idea that darkness heals. So, in fact, that's what I say when you come to my page, Anatomy of Night, Darkness Heals. And I talk about the importance of darkness in a 24-hour cycle for our psyche, for our bodies, for the way that we meet the world. And it's a lost art, the idea that darkness is meaningful. And so that's what I am trying to bring to people to support dark skies, because I don't think dark skies is enough. I think it's far from enough in terms of selling where we need to get to. Dark skies, people don't know what they're missing. So it's not a great selling point to the average
it isn't.
person.
And amen,
Yeah, I
amen,
was going to say
sister.
when I go to meetings with officials, I don't even bring up astronomy. I bring up, environmental, human health, those sorts of things, because, they already think you're a crackpot. You don't need to feed that at all.
No, you can just say
I
this,
don't think.
okay? So you've obviously heard of human-centric lighting, which is basically exploding, okay? So the idea of, here's what I'll tell you. All we know, I'm the host of the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. I've interviewed all the top scientists. We know that we can hurt people with light, okay? We know that. We can do that for sure. But can we actually improve their health? Well, you know what it turns out? The only way you can improve people's health through lighting is to help them sleep. That's the only thing. Every other benefit that they talk about with human-centric lighting is directly related to improving someone's sleep. All the other benefits, more alertness, feeling better, better mood, all those are extensions of sleeping better. That's it. How do you help people sleep better? Start with darkness.
Yeah, and just kind of the light, the dark, the yin, the yang, just really kind of getting that kind of global perspective. And, for me, working astronomy, that's what's so healing about astronomy is stepping back and getting this cosmic perspective and trying to communicate that to other people, instead of just, having tunnel vision and not realizing, oh yeah, that school looks like a prison now, and not even noticing that.
I think there's an effect between outdoor lighting and lighting and human behavior. I think if you make it feel like a prison, it is a prison. Like that's what
Right.
a prison is about. How you feel. You feel
Right.
like you're in jail when you're in jail. If you make people feel like that, they'll behave like that. I think it's so important. Totally.
Well, and the term that one of our fellow chapter members came up with, that feel free to use it. It's not copywritten, and that's weaponized lighting. And we
Oh,
see
yeah.
that all around. I don't want homeless people here. I'm going to put up a light, and that's one thing I'm going to try to do. Is the city does put up street lights, and they have a purpose, and they know, yeah, we want even lighting here. And then you drive by this bank, and they put a wall pack, you know, 10 feet from the curb, that shines in the eyes of drivers. That's not safe. And that's another thing. That's another way I kind of flip this. I say, hey, that lighting isn't safe, because everybody thinks, oh yeah, darkness is unsafe. No, that lighting is unsafe, and so I'll just name it. So I had a moderate success here with the bank where I have my business account. They have wall packs at night, and there's the ATM there, and they have these nice recessed lighting so you can see your way, and those have to be white light. You want to see what you're doing, but pointing out to the small little parking lot, 3 wall packs, and just total overkill. And so I took a picture and went into the bank manager and said, hey, I don't think these are safe, because they just blind you walking up. And he was kind of uninterested, but in the lighting issue, but he knew, oh, here's a customer that is unhappy, so he forwarded my complaint to the property manager, and the guy found a fixture that points down with front shielding, and it looks much better. It's probably still overkill how much light they have coming down. If I was a lighting designer, I probably would tone it down a little bit, but it's so much better. And I did before and after pictures from the same perspective, and made a little video of it, and it's so dramatic. And trying to change people's mind with things they can see. If we can't get them out there, which I think that's a really key thing, and we're going to try to do that this fall when it starts getting dark a little. Have community walks where we can say, see for yourself what do you see, what are you experiencing, with your own eyesight and your own brain. So
Well, thank you so much for all the education that you're doing, Andy. And I think it's obvious that we could talk to you for a lot longer. So this is just the beginning of our conversation together.
Tons of notes.
Is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with?
I've got another term that you can steal that I use every once in a while. I use it sparingly, but light privilege instead of white privilege. I use
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
I think the privilege is to have the darkness.
But yeah,
Well, and that
you
is
know,
also a
just
statement that darkness is a privilege as well, because you'll see in a lot of communities that have higher income levels, there's actually more darkness
For
than
sure.
in other communities. And
Yep.
that's an emerging topic in the field, which is how we use light to treat humans
Hmm.
and make them feel watched instead of seen. And there's a lot of great work that's happening on that. So I think it's true that these terms weaponized light. I recently wrote that we need to incriminate light, that it is not innocuous, that these terms help to convey in little sound bites because sometimes that's all you get. And just thank you so much for helping to cultivate this language and bring this conversation out into the world. And Andy, it was a pleasure, and we look forward to continuing to talk to you more.
yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity. And I'll leave you with a quote too, because I think this goes back to what we were talking about with those, Japanese people realizing, we're losing part of our culture. It's such a American thing, more is better. And, oh, light is better. I went to this little tiny museum in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and they had these history of light fixtures going back to 3000 BC, and all these modifications so the wax doesn't drip and you can reuse the wax. So, we're up against a lot here. It's part of our DNA that we like light, right? We're diurnal, but this is our chapter president. He puts all these funny little quotes in his signature line, and this is his latest one. The secret of happiness, you see, is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. And that's from Socrates. So again,
Hmm.
um, you'll enjoy more if you can enjoy darkness. It's less light, but there's something to be said for that. And thanks for pushing this and having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you. You starved, now you're sated. That's right. I was starving for darkness with host Jane Slade and myself, co-host Michael Colligan. But before we go, we got to tell you about a little magic that we discovered in the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. And I'm talking about Evluma coming out with a massive, awesome, crazy, magical LED dark sky ready luminaire for the outside, Greg. AEVLUMA.com, the magicians.
That's right. And in addition to what we talked about at the beginning, they have a photo control fail-safe built into the fixture.
Come
And that
on.
actually, yeah, that replaces the need to have to worry about a photocell down the road.
I
So if
love
your
that,
photocell
man.
burns out, it learns what it needs to do so that it continues to operate as though the photocell is still working.
That's why it's
And then
magical, brother. It's magic.
magic. And then on top of that, they have the Connect LED that is a wireless lighting management system. Use your phone, control that thing, get fancy.
Oh man, Evluma is so hot with these products, man. I just love it. Go to evluma.com. That's evluma.com. Proud Dale member, National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Yeah, baby, come and get it. Bye for now.